On the morning of December 13th, 1967, a royal jet takes off from Athens carrying the last king of Greece into exile. On board are 27-year-old King Constantine II, his pregnant wife, Queen Anne-Marie, their 2 young children, and a failed coup against the military junta that now controls the country. 8 hours earlier, the king had flown to northern Greece, expecting the army and navy to rally behind him. They did not. His counter-coup collapsed within hours. Now he is fleeing to Rome with whatever he could grab from the palace. Constantine II would never reign again. But this was not the first time the Greek royal family had been expelled from their country. It was not even the second time. The House of Glucksburg had already been driven out in 1917 and again in 1924. They had returned in 1935 and fled again during the Nazi occupation in 1941. By 1967, exile had become something of a family tradition. What makes the Greek royal story unique is not that they lost their throne. Many dynasties did. What makes it unique is how they lost it, regained it, lost it again, and kept trying to come back for over a century. 3 kings abdicated. 1 died from a monkey bite. 1 was shot by an anarchist in the streets of Thessaloniki. And the last one lived long enough to see his children finally regain their Greek citizenship in December 2024, 50 years after the monarchy was abolished. This is the story of Europe's most turbulent royal family and why their drama never seems to end. The Greek monarchy did not begin with Greeks. When Greece won its independence from the Ottoman Empire in the 1820s, the great powers of Europe decided the new nation needed a king. They chose a Bavarian prince, Otto, who arrived in 1832 with German advisors, German soldiers, and German ideas about how to run a Mediterranean country. It did not go well. Otto was autocratic. His Bavarian court was unpopular, and after 30 years of simmering resentment, he was overthrown in 1862. Greece needed another king. The great powers, Britain, France, and Russia, conducted what amounted to a royal casting call. They considered several candidates before settling on an unlikely choice, a 17-year-old Danish prince named Wilhelm. Wilhelm was the second son of Prince Christian of Denmark, who would soon become King Christian IX. He had no particular connection to Greece. He did not speak Greek. He had been training for a career in the Danish Navy, but he had 2 critical advantages. First, he was young and malleable. Second, his family was spectacularly well connected. His sister Alexandra would marry the future King Edward VII of Britain. His other sister Dagmar would marry the future Tsar Alexander III of Russia. Through these connections, Little Denmark became the father-in-law of Europe. Wilhelm accepted the Greek throne, took the name George I, and arrived in Athens in October 1863. He was 17 years old. He would reign for nearly 50 years. George I proved to be a surprisingly capable king. He learned Greek, adopted Greek Orthodox customs, and carefully balanced the competing interests of the great powers who had installed him. He married Grand Duchess Olga of Russia in 1867, further cementing his dynasty's connections to European royalty. The king and queen had 8 children. Through their descendants, the Greek royal family would eventually be related to virtually every throne in Europe. George I's granddaughter Sophia would become Queen of Spain. His great-grandson Philip would marry Queen Elizabeth II of Britain. His great-great-granddaughter Letizia would become Queen of Spain through a different line. But Greece itself remained unstable. The country was poor, divided, and surrounded by hostile neighbors. The national dream was the Megali idea, the great idea of uniting all Greek-speaking peoples under one flag, including Constantinople itself. This dream drove Greek foreign policy for decades and led to a series of wars, some victorious, some catastrophic. In 1897, Greece rashly declared war on the Ottoman Empire over Crete and was swiftly defeated. The humiliation nearly cost George his throne. Only the intervention of his royal relatives in Britain and Russia prevented total disaster. The king rebuilt his popularity over the following decade. His eldest son Constantine commanded the Greek army during the Balkan Wars of 1912 to 1913, winning spectacular victories that doubled Greece's territory. Thessaloniki, Greece's second city, was captured from the Ottomans in November 1912. George I rode triumphantly through the streets of his newly conquered city. He was planning to abdicate after celebrating his 50th anniversary on the throne in October 1913. He never got the chance. On March 18, 1913, while taking his daily walk through Thessaloniki with minimal security, George I was shot in the back at close range by Alexandros Shenas, described as an anarchist. The king died instantly. Shenas was arrested, interrogated, and fell from a police station window 6 weeks later. The official story was suicide. Few believed it. George I was buried at the royal estate of Tatoi outside Athens. His son Constantine became king on the eve of the most destructive war Europe had ever seen. Constantine I inherited a kingdom at the peak of its power and popularity. He had won the Balkan Wars. He had married Princess Sophia of Prussia, sister of Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany. He seemed destined for greatness. Then came World War I, and everything fell apart. Constantine was married to the Kaiser's sister. His prime minister, Eleftherios Venizelos, was passionately pro-British and pro-French. Greece was torn between neutrality and intervention, between its German queen and its allied sympathies. The conflict between king and prime minister became known as the National Schism, and it would poison Greek politics for generations. Venizelos wanted Greece to join the Allies. Constantine insisted on neutrality, believing Greece had nothing to gain and everything to lose. The argument was not merely political. It became personal, tribal, almost religious. Greeks divided into Venizelists and Royalists, and families split along the same lines. In 1916, Venizelos established a rival government in Thessaloniki with Allied support. Greece effectively had two governments, two armies, and two foreign policies. The country was on the verge of civil war. In June 1917, the Allies issued an ultimatum. Constantine must abdicate. French warships aimed their guns at Athens. The king had no choice. Constantine left Greece on June 11, 1917, but he refused to formally abdicate. He handed the throne to his second son, Alexander, with the explicit understanding that Alexander was merely holding it in trust. Alexander was 23 years old, inexperienced, and widely regarded as a puppet of Venizelos. He would reign for 3 years under close supervision, unable to exercise any real power. And then, in October 1920, a monkey bit him. King Alexander had been walking in the royal gardens at Tatoi with his German shepherd when the dog got into a fight with a Barbary macaque. Alexander tried to separate them. The monkey bit him. The wound became infected. Sepsis set in. On October 25, 1920, Alexander died at the age of 27. He had reigned for 3 years and produced no heir, only a daughter from a morganatic marriage to a commoner. The throne passed, in theory, to Alexander's elder brother George, but George was in exile with his father and refused to return without Constantine. Meanwhile, Venizelos had called elections, confident of victory. He lost in a landslide. The Greek people, exhausted by war and sick of Venizelist rule, voted overwhelmingly for the royalist opposition. A referendum followed in December 1920. By a margin of nearly 99%, Greeks voted to restore Constantine I to the throne. Winston Churchill, then British Secretary of State for War, would later write one of history's most memorable observations about Alexander's death. It is perhaps no exaggeration to remark that 250,000 persons died of this monkey's bite. He was referring to what came next. Constantine returned to a country at war. Venizelos had launched an ambitious military campaign in Anatolia, attempting to claim the Greek-speaking regions of western Turkey. The campaign had gone well initially. Greek forces had advanced deep into Turkish territory. But everything changed when Constantine resumed command. The Allies, furious at his return, withdrew their support. French and Italian advisors were recalled. Arms shipments stopped. The Greek army, overextended and undersupplied, faced a resurgent Turkish nationalist movement led by Mustafa Kemal, who would later be known as Ataturk. In August 1922, the Turkish army launched a devastating counteroffensive. The Greek lines collapsed. What followed was a catastrophe. The Asia Minor disaster, as Greeks call it, resulted in the death or displacement of over 1 million Greek Orthodox Christians who had lived in Anatolia for 3,000 years. The city of Smyrna burned. Ancient Greek communities were erased forever. The Greek army revolted. Officers demanded Constantine's abdication. On September 27, 1922, Constantine stepped down for the second and final time. He went into exile in Italy and died of a brain hemorrhage in Palermo on January 11, 1923. He was 54 years old. His eldest son, George II, took the throne, but not for long. In March 1924, another referendum abolished the monarchy entirely. George went into exile. The Second Hellenic Republic was proclaimed. It lasted 11 years, during which Greece experienced 23 changes of government, 1 dictatorship, and 13 coups. In 1935, yet another military coup brought yet another referendum. By a suspiciously overwhelming margin, Greeks voted to restore the monarchy. George II returned from exile and resumed his reign. Within a year, he had endorsed a dictatorship under General Ioannis Metaxas. The 4th of August regime, as it was called, banned political parties, imprisoned opponents, and modeled itself on fascist Italy. Then came World War II. When Italy invaded Greece in October 1940, the Greek army fought back with unexpected ferocity. "Heroes fight like Greeks," Churchill declared. But when Germany intervened in April 1941, resistance collapsed within weeks. George II fled again, first to Crete, then to Egypt, then to London. He spent the war in exile while Greece suffered brutal occupation and a devastating famine. After liberation came civil war. Communist partisans who had fought the Germans now fought the royalist government. Britain and America supported the monarchy. The Soviet Union supported the communists. Greece became an early battlefield of the Cold War. In 1946, a controversial referendum, conducted while the Civil War raged, returned a result of 68% in favor of the monarchy. George II came back to Athens for the third time. He died on April 1, 1947, at the age of 56. The official cause was arteriosclerosis. Some suspected stress had simply worn him out. He had spent more of his reign in exile than on the throne. His younger brother Paul succeeded him. Paul would reign for 17 years, through the end of the Civil War, through the reconstruction of Greece, through the country's membership in NATO and its association with the European Economic Community. When Paul died in March 1964, the throne passed to his only son, a 23-year-old who had won a gold medal for sailing at the 1960 Rome Olympics. His name was Constantine II. He would be the last. Constantine II was young, handsome, athletic, and utterly unprepared for what was coming. Within months of his coronation, he clashed with Prime Minister George Papandreou over control of the military. Constantine dismissed Papandreou in July 1965, triggering a constitutional crisis. What followed was called the apostasia, the defection, as members of Papandreou's party crossed the floor to support governments appointed by the king. The country descended into political chaos. Elections were scheduled for May 1967. They never happened. On April 21, 1967, a group of middle-ranking army officers staged a coup. Tanks surrounded the royal palace at Tatoi. The king's staff was arrested. Constantine, caught off guard, initially considered resisting but realized he had no loyal forces to rely on. He made a fateful decision. Rather than flee immediately, he agreed to swear in the junta's government, hoping to moderate it from within. It was a mistake he would regret for the rest of his life. For 8 months, Constantine maintained an uneasy coexistence with the colonels. He later said that April 21, 1967 was the worst day of my life. On December 13, 1967, Constantine finally acted. He flew with his family to the northern city of Kavala, expecting the military commanders there to rally to his cause. They did not. The counter-coup collapsed almost immediately. Communications were cut. Units that had promised support failed to move. By nightfall, Constantine realized further resistance would mean bloodshed. He loaded his family onto the royal plane and flew to Rome. He would never return as king. The junta formally abolished the monarchy on June 1, 1973, after yet another disputed referendum. Constantine's properties were seized. His Greek citizenship was revoked. When the junta itself collapsed in July 1974, following its disastrous intervention in Cyprus, democracy was restored under Constantine Karamanlis. Another referendum was called for December 1974. This time, Constantine was not even allowed to return to campaign. The result was decisive. 69% voted against the monarchy. The Greek Republic was permanent. Constantine settled in London, in the suburb of Hampstead Garden. He remained close to his second cousin Charles, Prince of Wales. He attended royal weddings, funerals, and coronations across Europe. His sister Sophia was Queen of Spain. His relatives sat on thrones from Copenhagen to Madrid. But he was a king without a country. Greek governments treated him with varying degrees of hostility. His property remained confiscated. His citizenship was stripped. He was forbidden from using his royal title in Greece. When he entered his own country, he did so on a foreign passport. In 1981, Constantine was allowed to return for the first time since 1967, but only for a few hours, to bury his mother, Queen Frederica. In 1994, the Greek government confiscated the royal family's remaining properties, including the Tatoi estate where 5 generations of Greek royals were buried. Constantine sued in the European Court of Human Rights and won a partial victory in 2002. He received 12 million euros in compensation, a fraction of what he had claimed. Gradually, the hostility softened. Constantine began returning to Greece more frequently. In 2013, he and Queen Anne-Marie announced they were moving back permanently. On January 10, 2023, Constantine II died in Athens at the age of 82. He was buried at Tatoi alongside his ancestors, the first Greek royal burial in Greece in over 50 years. The Greek royal family today exists in a peculiar limbo. The current head of the family is Crown Prince Pavlos, Constantine's eldest son. He was only 7 months old when his family fled Greece in 1967. He grew up in Rome and London, attended Georgetown University in Washington, and married Marie Chantal Miller, the American-born daughter of a billionaire, in 1995. Their wedding at St. Sophia's Cathedral in London was one of the most glittering royal events of the decade. More crowned heads attended than at the wedding of Charles and Diana. The dress alone reportedly cost $225,000. Pavlos and Marie Chantal have 5 children. Maria Olympia, who has become a model and fashion figure. Constantine Alexios, who would have been heir to the throne had there been one. Achilleas Andreas, Odysseus Kimon, and Aristides Stavros. The children style themselves as princes and princesses, though Greece does not recognize these titles. They move in the same circles as their royal cousins across Europe. Maria Olympia walks runways for Dolce & Gabbana. Constantine Alexios models for Dior. In December 2024, the family reached a historic settlement with the Greek government. Pavlos, his siblings, and his children formally renounced all claims to any title or position. They pledged allegiance to the Greek Republic, and they adopted a legal surname, de Grace, meaning of Greece. In exchange, they received Greek citizenship for the first time in 30 years. Queen Anne-Marie, now 78 years old, chose not to apply. She remains a Danish princess, the youngest sister of the late Queen Margrethe II. She has lived most of her adult life in exile, first in Rome, then in London, and now in Athens.